Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. So, welcome to a discussion and a bit of a kind of montage here about the fighter, the basic grunt, the resident flunky of the roster, or so it seems, for Unicorn Overlord. They're a class that oftentimes gets kind of laughed out of the room, so to speak. Usually they're seen as kind of a slot filler, somebody to take a hit for somebody more important, somebody to defend against arrows but worse than the hoplite, or seen as just intentionally designed to be bad on purpose because they need a generic, soldier character. Even though there is already a generic soldier character, and here's a fighter making fun of him. Anyway, now, as far as I'm concerned, they are actually a bit more of a versatile shit talker. As weird as this, I mean, that is directly their thing, but it's a bit more useful than it gets credit for. So effectively, what I wanted to do is take a team of just fighters and see if I could get them to win in multiplayer, because I figure if they can go ahead and survive there, they can survive just about anywhere. I mean, within reason, of course. Now, so I went ahead and slapped a few mercenaries together, went over to do some extra side objectives, and then realized that actually setting up multiplayer teams is not it's not grueling or anything. It's just a little bit awkward. It's definitely less awkward than most games I've done stuff like this for, because basically it just results in go do those sigils and whatever else, and you go get a bunch of free units. Also, as part of this little adventure, I decided to redecorate Lex to look like Dart from Legend of Dragoon, so at least he's somewhat respectable now. Now, I had a few thoughts as far as this class went, that they seemingly have some offensive potential, so maybe it wouldn't be a terrible idea to have him running a Sanguine Blade. Honestly, that one ended up being scrapped down the road. Their Defender move is pretty okay. Basically, it's a double hit move, which basically seems to count as multiple different hits. So, for example, if somebody is using any immunity shields, it seems to be able to break through those better. But here is my favorite feature about the fighter that I never see discussed as much. See, normally when you use something like an arrow rain to go take out somebody in a tower, you have to spend 2 points to do it. When you use Wild Rush to go run down a tower, it takes 3 points. If you use a flyer, it takes you half a damn minute to go fly over there. If you use a fighter, you can ungarrison a tower and it'll be a long time until anyone else gets there at a simple 1-point cost. They're effectively the easiest way to clear towers, bar none. They're the easiest way to run units into landmines. They're the easiest way to potentially, keep a unit safe from arrows. Obviously, that one was pretty obvious. But additionally, their kind of high defense and general versatility lends itself well to fighting a whole lot of different things. In this case, obviously, this is after they've been grinding up a little while, so they've got a good bit of meat under their belt. This is a early game fight, nothing really too serious. Hell, a couple of these guys were from frickin' Albion, so they're going to be just fine. Originally, my thought process was that I would go around and collect all of the different mercenaries with the different helmets. The fighters all get the same helmet when they get promoted, so anyway, that plan got thrown by the wayside. But anyways, I threw them into some Coliseum fights, and as you'll see in just a moment, I believe the kind of dictionary term is that they got their shit rocked. So that didn't go terribly well. As a little bit of a side note, I appreciate that despite many of the other characters not necessarily changing that much, all Leia does is show up with 2 swords. Anyway, one of the few executions you actually handle yourself. So what I decided to do was travel around and just kind of look for additional equipment for them and stuff like that. So looking for the Animoy items and stuff like that, which I gotta love. I absolutely love that all of the Wind God weapons from the Ogre games are here, including the Notos, with a slightly technically legally distinct name. Except for the Boreas, or not the Boreas, but the Euros. For some reason, the Euros is the only one that's also a second Boreas. I'm not sure what that's about. Again, that to me feels like one of those just like it's technically legally distinct kind of situations. Anyway, so I was going and, again, just going and collecting items for them, because that Sanguine Blade thing, it kind of works. If you go for a completely offensive setup for them, it can be okay. But generally speaking, direct attacks are not really what the fighter is good at, funnily enough. They're very good at defending, and they're very good at adapting. So eventually ended up shifting over to damage over time weapons, as well as a lot of defensive abilities. So we'll continue exploring around and collecting more goodies, and let's go ahead and continue to discuss here. Actually, I think this is when I took a little bit of a side tour here to realize that this dude's ghost wife actually shows up to haunt him, which is, I gotta say that reminds me of the post game scene they throw into every Pokemon game of just like, oh no, they're gonna be right there, and then for a brief second you just see what seems like the ghost wife pop back in. It didn't seem to come up on the recording much. Anyway, so threw them into the fight here to see how it went, and the results were not great. There were a bunch of issues with this party. So at first I figured we'd use a bunch of wall abilities on shields, we'd use a bunch of regeneration abilities, attempt to win using just that, right? So we'd use a lot of extra guard abilities. That Bear's Den, those gauntlets were actually really solid for this because on top of their already high defense, the Bear's Den was enough to make them be able to withstand almost anything. At which point, survival became the key. Survival became the main thing to go for here. And as you see right there, that defender does count as two distinct hits. They can hit or miss separately. So what I decided was high defense, high evasion, damage over time, as well as a bunch of different immunities and things. And immediately they started getting hard countered by this, dodgy MFer over here. So that didn't go terribly well for them, but lessons were learned. So we went in for another attempt here. Apologies to whoever's teams these are, but anyways. I actually have no clue how the ranking in this works. Currently, I am sitting in out of rank. But I decided to see, after they got completely ruined in multiplayer, they survived, but they didn't exactly come close to winning. So I figured I'd look into the post arena and see what that looks like for them. Needless to say, it didn't go well. They lasted like 3 seconds, and apparently the recording timed out a little bit before then. So I figured I'd go back to the drawing board, go and kind of reassess, get them some higher levels for one thing, because they were still in the 30s. Everybody that they're fighting in the arena is in the 50s. So figured we'd go that route. I haven't gone and used anything other than the dues that I already had on the party, because I was trying to get them to at least kill something. So either way, this right here is one of those massive value things as far as Provoke goes, and it's one of the reasons that they're really good as a general-purpose slot filler in most parties. Provoke as a skill is one of the most utilitarian kind of Valor skills that there are. You're getting a ton of, essentially a ton of return for a single point. You can completely dismantle a ballista, you can completely empty out a tower, you can basically passively just move units around, just kind of at your own leisure there. So easily one of the best skills there. And as far as actually directly fighting things, obviously, again, with a 3 times level advantage, they're going to definitely have an easier time here. But I figured I would at least see if there were more issues that they were running into. Because surprisingly enough, even the ace squads that I was using in my team did manage to find ways to get themselves killed off in some of these situations. But here's one of those tricks that I wanted to show off, that if you put down a landmine and you have multiple units, you can actually provoke them into a landmine. And one clip that apparently didn't get recorded here is one that was incredibly handy in terms of doing an absolute ton of damage with a landmine, because you can actually hit more than one unit with a mine at the same time. If you see that you're about to win with a unit, and you provoke another unit from behind them into essentially into a mine, and you cause them both to hit it at the same time, they both will lose 50% of their health. Mines seem to always do 50% health. So if you're looking for a way to potentially knock out multiple units at one time, that is a fun little trick that you can do. And additionally, if you're ever looking to power level a squad for multiplayer, it turns out these guys are actually really handy for that as well. You simply provoke somebody out of the ballista, have them walk up and take it, and then just simply go and fire on things. On this map in particular, you will basically always get your first point for an additional kind of a deploy point there, right before they end up getting that command post grab, and during that time you can go send your favorite flyers out to go deal with the nonsense in the background. In this case, I turned off the flyers partway through their flight, and they died to a ballista, so I ended up using the backup team of flyers. But it is what it is. Actually, no, wait, I think the backup team of flyers also died, and then I just sent the freaking cavalry. Anyway, though. Their whole trick of provoking units out of Okay, sorry, a little bit of a random cough there. Anyway, so their whole trick of moving units out of their emplacements is very, very handy. However, I want to compare them with some of their peers real quick. See, the thing is, unlike the Hoplite, they do not have nearly the amount of movement penalty that the Hoplite does. For comparison's sake, basically it's the average speed of everybody that's in a unit that decides their mobility, and if you're putting in a Hoplite, they have bar none the lowest at 50. When it comes to the fighter, they have 100, so effectively double the speed that they do. Now, it's not a crazy amount of speed, but it isn't as much of an issue, so they don't end up slowing down a party as much. Additionally, due to their high defense, they actually share pretty high defense as well as many of the same strengths and weaknesses, kind of direct fighting-wise, where both of them typically want to rely on DOT moves, both of them want to rely on a bunch of defensive abilities. However, they rely more on a medium guard rather than a heavy guard. That medium guard, if it's combined with the right items, can also keep them surviving just as well as that heavy guard would. As we'll see in just a moment, because after a bit of retooling and refitting, I ended up going and actually getting 4 out of the 5 wins for the multiplayer thing that was available there. I'm not super familiar with how the multiplayer stuff works, but either way, so what I had done is this is actually before the retooling, because of that moment right there. See, the toughness thing is enough to save them from one attack, but just like the Hoplite, they share a weakness to kind of can opener weapons as well as magic. Which basically means that high evasion is generally going to be a very useful thing against both, but additionally, versus magic stuff, we wanted to have an accurate counter of some description. So as long as the front line can counter, and the back line can use, for example, sonic attacks off of the Sylph Blade, they're actually able to effectively counter casters. Additionally, with only 2 units exposed out front, many of the forward sweeping moves have a far harder time actually doing their thing. Also, apparently, I kept trying to mash through the menu here. So, I went back with a bit of a retool here. So, I decided to go for much higher evasion on the very front there, as well as toughness on one of those units. So, for example, while he does have a guard seal on him right now, he did end up surviving with 1 health, which was enough for him to come back and start poisoning things. So the poison was the first one that was a bit on the obvious side. In this case, they have no realistic hope of reaching that cleric in the back within any reasonable amount of time. So for the moment, they're just kind of going for whatever attacks are available. That Sanguine Blade against high defense units, it's basically worthless. With this much of a level disadvantage, they still ended up winning, though. They're still sub 40. I think they're at like 36, 37, something like that, but on account of those DOTs, on account of surviving hits and guarding that often, as well as the large aid kit, they're actually able to secure wins in multiplayer here. So, anyways, we go over to this. Actually, one of the things I was considering is putting more debuff immunities here, but against most attacks, they're able to basically guard this stuff away. And additionally, again, when it comes to stuff like the Iron Staff there, which is going to be throwing out immunities and kind of just general purpose. Kind of a damage neglection type of shenaniganry, it allows Defender allows for that to be broken down. So either way, they go for all of those multiple attacks, they go for smacking everybody around, not really landing too many debuffs, but at the moment, it was clear that the Sylph Blade was doing a great job against flyers and things. They're not doing very much, but they can at least touch them, which is more than we could do before. Party Aid is doing a great job of offsetting the numbers of the number of hits that they were taking, and generally speaking, they were taking about 1 loss per fight. This wasn't... While this wasn't ideal, it was basically a little bit of a crumple zone, because it caused most of those attacks to try to hit that one guy that would constantly survive with 1 health. So it was mostly a damage over time thing that would end up killing him. Effectively, what I was thinking when making that guy was the, what's his face, friggin', what's that ghost thing? Here it was like... Okay, now I just remembered of it. So basically the idea behind it is a Shedinja, more or less, that he constantly survives with 1 health. So they ended up losing to that Griffin team in the first place, but they had gotten multiple heavy hits off on some of those units. So to try and offset the numbers, I decided to just go immediately for a second attempt to see if it was a consistent thing or a fluke. And they did end up hitting the Griffin a bit harder. There is a pretty decently high crit rate on the guy that's using the Self. Basically, the Self just allows them to do the javelin thing that the soldier does, but off of a sword. But additionally, it gives them additional evasion, so that's generally pretty handy. There's like, generally, high evasion, high defense is their bread and butter here. And while they can't make use of their Provoke ability here, actually, I decided to take Provoke off of everybody on this team for the purpose of making them all work together and use that the Bear Glove to give everybody a bit of an improvement. It still is one of those things that can be really useful. Like, Provoke, while it will often result in the death of that particular fighter unit, it does give you immense value in terms of making sure that nobody's going anywhere else. It basically ensures that all heavy attacks are going on one guy, and if you counter it hard enough, sure enough, they can basically redirect all those attacks and, basically survive the impossible as far as the rest of the team goes. The main issue is... if they get countered, if they get hit by those heavies, mages, anything like that. But thankfully, if you're targeting your Provoke at the front row, you'll almost never run into the issue of those ones getting you run down. Again, high evasion, high defense. That should just be your build for them. Don't even try for offense outside of trick weapons and whatnot. I just really love their multi-hits and stuff like that. I feel like there's definitely some play to be made with something like Warding Slash. So, like, Provoke is pretty solid. I saw one question pop up as far as somebody that wanted to trigger Provoke partway through the fight, and there is... I mean, it does start at the start of the fight, but if you, for example... let's say use something like a hood to immediately set up a Warding Slash or something, that could be one way to potentially make a near invincible kind of a frontline fighter kind of thing. That being said, generally that 20% bonus off of the Bear Glove, I personally found a lot more useful. But again, you do you. Maybe it'll be more useful for somebody's oddly specific team. I tried a bunch of different setups using the hood for this team. But their blue points were just simply better spent on using their other skills. It's funny because I see a lot of comments over the hood being overpowered, completely ignoring the fact that they've lost all their blue points for somebody else to take one extra action. In some cases, that's very good for heavy hitters. For everybody else, that's pretty garbage. But anyway, either way, highly inefficient for potentially one big attack. It again depends. Anyway, so stuff was going pretty well on these guys. They were setting their frontliners on fire. It was actually interesting to see a Housecarl here. I'm not sure why there was just a random normal Housecarl that was unpromoted, but apparently that's just a thing that's there. Actually, come to think of it, these weren't even Swordmasters. These were basic sword fighters. What's the deal with that? Huh. I don't know, that kind of puts a damper on the whole winning thing, but yeah, it's weird that they wanted to go for those instead. I mean, that seems to be a deliberate choice. They've got other stuff on this team. Like, they've got their elves, they've got their Vikings and stuff like that, so what's the deal with those? Alright, whatever. Maybe you know what, maybe they just assumed, like I did, that they got upgraded as time went on or something. That they just upgraded using the team that you currently have, which is not how that works. Anyway. So yeah, this whole thing of having kind of one sniper unit, two DOT units, and everybody else focused on defense here seemed to work pretty well. I was considering adding another toughness belt to it, but that was basically the daily maximum, so that's all that was allowed. So looking over their skills and things. Again, a lot of their stuff comes down to their equipment, but I personally feel Defender is one of the better offensive moves. Shield Bash isn't amazing. Like, Warding Slash and Shield Bash are weird. Like, Shield Bash in general just gives them a move to go stun something. It lets them shut something down. I've seen some complaints over the amount of damage that it does, but it's literally just a Shield Bash. Like, yeah, shields are heavy, but it's still a stun. That's the main reason you're using it. Okay, we'll just leave it to loop this one because the video's ended. So, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to their skills here, they do their job more or less. I feel like Warding Slash was just something that's kind of there as a kind of a move with Magikarp potential, giving them something that's potentially uniquely useful later on in the game. But Warding Slash is just kind of a basic attack when you're earlier on. As far as their shield bash, it's a stun. It's a fairly cheap stun. A lot of units get a cheap stun, but either way, it's fine for their purposes. I feel like early game, just like late game, a lot of their offense comes from DOT weapons. You get the Viper Blade pretty much immediately. So you get I want to point out that one of those things that does kind of go a little bit unsung as far as the fighter is concerned is the fact that they get access to a lot of stuff a bit earlier than other units do. So, for example, like a active shatter on a weapon, the sword is the first one to get that through the Crimson Epee, which you get on Tutorial Island. When it comes to your poison weapons, you get your Viper Blade pretty much immediately. When it comes to a magic weapon, you get the Rune Sword pretty much immediately. When it comes to what was it? When it comes to a health-stealing sword... Actually, sorry, Crimson Epee was later. The Sanguine Blade is the one I'm thinking of. Sanguine Blade's the health stealer. You get that pretty much immediately. So they get early access to a lot of things, and easier access to a lot of things than other units generally do, which means you probably will have better equipment for them earlier on. Not exactly a perfect thing by itself, but still, considering that that they're going into these things and can still win fights with a 15-level advantage, despite supposedly being a sucky class. I mean, I feel like they're a bit better than they get credit for. The defense that they get, their physical defense in particular, is not necessarily unique to them, but the amount of defense that they get for their mobility is pretty solid. Granted, Knights also can potentially reach their levels of defense, but they may not necessarily be able to do things like a Provoke or whatnot. And additionally, their ability to resist ranged attacks is, again, another one of those little unsung things. There's a lot of units that can come down to just fire on them with arrows, and in their particular case, they get to choose which assist fires they'll take, because if they end up, say, running into a fight that they see that the unit's going to potentially get hit by units from far away using a tower, they can weaken the power of those towers. If there's casters in a tower, that would completely shred them, but if they berserk them, or sorry, if they essentially provoke them, they would be able to potentially still win that engagement anyway, because they end up losing in the case of taking the support fire. But if, for example, you give them items to make up for their kind of naturally lower magic defense, I want to point out that they have lower magic defense, not nearly as bad as the Hoplite. So if you take their lower, basically you're improving their matchup in that situation by provoking a enemy caster instead, letting them get close, and essentially using their now higher magic defense to fight them up close, maybe get some hits off earlier. Essentially, they are a more flexible hoplite in that particular way. Provoke is, again, just a really useful tool in a lot of situations, whether it's preventing all damage to the party, give or take, especially against stuff like cavalry. If you have if you ever ran into an issue where you had a party that was getting completely shredded by cavalry, get a Cavalry Hunter shield onto a Vanguard, and go ahead and have them use Provoke. Remember that you can only trigger one start of battle ability, but they use Provoke on all those cavalry. All those cavalry go on the guy that suddenly can now heavy guard versus those things. There's a lot of medium shields that a lot of units do not get a whole lot of use out of, because they're too oddly specific to essentially kind of deal with. But in their case, when we're looking at a situation where they can essentially see that certain units are coming, and yes, you can tell what units are coming, because you can go scout out fights before you get there. You just run around the map and see where you're going to be fighting. It won't tell you about all the ambushes, but it will give you an idea of what you're running into. But give them something like a Cavalry Hunter shield. That gives them a heavy guard, which is the same thing that keeps the Hoplite running all the time. So now they're effectively able to defend just as well as the Hoplite, and additionally it gives them additional PP for defending more moves. So they can defend for free versus certain unit types using a lot of medium shields that other classes can't guarantee that they'll get any use out of. Does that make sense? So, as far as I'm concerned, the fighter is a pretty solid class. Overall, it is trickier to use than some of the other ones out there, but I feel like a lot of their downsides are a bit overplayed, and a lot of their advantages are oftentimes completely ignored in favor of, yeah, they're not exactly a terribly sexy class, and Lex is an absolute dork, but that's why you go and make him look like Dart, so he's at least somewhat respectable. Anyway, that's about that. Y'all have yourselves a good one, and take care. Hope this was helpful.